Hey everyone. Okay, in this video, let's talk about what Walt would have wanted. Okay, now this is such a loaded topic. Okay, and I want to go over with you what I believe as a fan community, how we should approach the Walt Disney Company in respect to what Walt would have wanted. Okay, now I'm not one of these Disney fans that believes that everything that Walt said we should take with, treat it like the gospel. I don't believe that. I think there are different tiers of Walt quotes, and I think that we should treat things differently. So what do I mean by that? Let's take, for example, a quote he said about Disneyland. As long as there's imagination left in the world, Disneyland will never be complete. Now, this was a creative decision he made at the beginning of Disneyland, saying, look, you know what? I want this park to evolve and change forever. As long as there's imagination in the world, and as long as Disneyland is still standing and it's still open, I want the place to change. Now, that was a creative decision, and I think that was a decision he made that really stood the test of time. Obviously, that was very clear. I mean, forever he wanted this place to change. So that is a quote, that is a desire I think that we should honor as Disney fans or as Disney management. They should honor that desire to constantly evolve and change this park, or parks really across the globe. Now, compare that to the quotes he made about banning alcohol at Disneyland. Now, this, in my opinion, is a business decision he made and a social issue. It's not something that I think was intended to be an evergreen desire like change at Disneyland. And why do I think that? Well, you got to put yourself in Walt's position. When he was creating Disneyland, he wanted to set his park aside from what was currently out there with the seaside piers and the amusement parks. At that time, there were a lot of trash in these amusement parks, and there was homeless people and drunks and what have you. So Walt was basically trying to make a business decision and tell people, hey, look, you know what? My park isn't going to have the alcohol. It's going to be a dry park. It's going to be different than everyone else's parks right now. It was a business decision. It was not a moral decision. Walt Disney was not against drinking. Okay, he drank kind of a lot. Okay, he drank kind of a lot, and he wasn't even against, in my opinion, having adult things, so to speak, in a park around children. I mean, he had no problem with a tobacco store on Main Street. He had no problem with smoking all over the park. You could smoke anywhere at Disneyland when it opened. For decades, you can smoke anywhere you wanted. So he was fine with that, but for some reason the alcohol was a problem. The alcohol was a problem because he wanted to make a contrast between the seaside piers with the drunks falling over themselves and Disneyland. He wanted to make a contrast between the two. It was a business decision. And it was also a social issue. And, as time goes on, society changes. Today, Disneyland only has a handful of smoking areas. And even the few smoking areas that they have, people are at issue with those locations. Okay, a lot of people want an outright ban on smoking, whereas when Walt started Disneyland, smoking was perfectly acceptable socially. I mean, you could walk around with a cigarette, you could smoke, you could do whatever. I remember when I was a kid, I would go to the doctor's office, and I remember in the elevators in the 80s, they used to have, ashtrays in the elevators. Smoking has evolved. It's changed. As a society, we've become less and less tolerant to smoking. Okay, and I think that it's comparable to alcohol. Maybe in Walt's day, the alcohol in the amusement parks was socially kind of a negative connotation. But as we've gone on, it's almost 2019, it's changed. It's changed, and I think that people are more accepting of alcohol in parks, and everyone knows the difference now between a Disney park and a seedy seaside amusement pier. So we don't need to make that contrast anymore. Alcohol at Disneyland isn't going to change how people feel about Disney parks. So that's how I feel. Every Walt Disney quote is not the same. Is not the same. And we should take each quote and each desire from Walt and sort of, just use common sense and practicality and really look at it, each quote as a different issue. You can't take everything he says at face value and the gospel, because look, this man died 50 years ago. Society is different. Disney has to evolve as a company. If you want to take the alcohol ban at Disneyland literally by the book, he didn't want alcohol, we shouldn't have it forever, well, then you have to take the smoking stuff literally as well. So should we open up smoking to the parks? That's what Walt wanted. That's what Walt had when he first opened Disneyland. So should we have smoking throughout the parks again? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So socially, when it comes to smoking or when it comes to drinking, these things change as society changes. But there are evergreen desires like Disneyland evolving and changing and constantly adding new things. That's something that's a creative decision Walt made that I think we should honor forever. So what do you guys think about what Walt would have wanted? What do you think? Do you agree with me that there are different... Every situation is different. You can't take every Walt quote the same way. You can't treat every Walt quote or policy or desire as a holy gospel. You have to look at each situation differently. Or do you disagree with me? I'd love to hear from you guys. Comment below. Thank you guys so much for all your support. And as always, have a wonderful day.